Boaz knows that there is somebody closer in kinship to Ruth, or excuse me, to Naomi than he is. So he gives that person the opportunity. Person is interested in buying the land till he finds out a woman goes with it. So then he backs down. They do that exchange where she takes his sandal, and a little bit different from the way God originally set that up, but at any rate, the deal is made. And then in verse 9, Boaz said to the elders, all the people, you are witnesses today that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. Moreover, I have acquired Ruth, the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, to be my wife, in order to raise up the name of the deceased on his inheritance, so that the name of the deceased may not be cut off from his brothers or from the court of his birthplace. You are witnesses today, and all the people who are in the court. And the elders said, we are witnesses. And then they pronounce a blessing. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, both of whom built the house of Israel. And may you achieve wealth in Ephrathah and become famous in Bethlehem. Moreover, may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, through the offspring which the Lord shall give you by this young man, or young woman, excuse me. Interesting deal about the reference to Tamar and Judah. Are any of you familiar with what happened there? This is another Tamar. This is a previous Tamar. She was the daughter-in-law of Judah. Did someone say something over here? So to speak.
She tricked him.
Mm-hmm.
She had his child.
Mm-hmm. Tamar had married one of Judah's sons. That son died before having any children. So Tamar was passed on to the next son. Well, he did not want to fulfill his husbandly duties, and God was angry with him, and he died. So now there's another son left, a much younger one. He's not of marriageable age yet. So Judah promises her, Tamar, that he will give that son to her when he reaches the right age. However, Judah doesn't want to do that because he's already lost two sons to her. And I don't know if he figures she's some sort of black widow, perhaps. But anyway, he does not want to do this. And it becomes obvious to Tamar that he's not going to do this. So Tamar, during the time when they shear the sheep, do the harvest, and all of these sorts of things, and they're celebrating and they're off away from home, disguises herself as a prostitute and puts herself in Judah's path, and eventually what you're thinking does come to pass. He doesn't have any money on him, so he leaves his ring and a staff with her. That's a promissory note. And he's going to come back the next day and pay her. So she disappears. He goes around asking people, what happened to the temple prostitute that was here? And they start laughing at him. He said, there's not been anybody like that around here. We don't have that going on here. And he tells his sons, well, we made the effort. Let's not make ourselves a laughing stock. So they go home. Later on, they find out that she is pregnant. And they said, she has played the harlot. And he says, bring her out so that we may burn her. They're going to kill Tamar because that was, execution was the price for that kind of immorality. But she says, I can identify the guy that got me pregnant. He's the guy who owns this. And it's Judah's stuff. So guess what? Judah is no longer interested in enforcing the death penalty because he would have to enforce it on himself as well. So he says, well, she's more righteous than I am. And so at any rate, she bears a child who is both his son as well as his grandson, technically. So anyway, this is one of those things when you write this up in the family tree, you just don't know how to tell the kids about this one. What? The family tree, yeah. Yeah, we're going to get to that too. Well, no, not necessarily, but we do know that is in his lineage. Yes, you're right. So the blessing, it's an amazing thing. May you be like Tamar, who bore a child to Judah. They're not covering up the family problems, aren't they? They're letting it out in the open. And that's one of the amazing things about the Bible. It does not try to leave you with a picture of a perfect hero. They let you see them warts and all, you might say. Anyway, that blessing goes on her. So Boaz takes her as his wife. She is enabled by the Lord to conceive and has a son. And then the women are celebrating with Naomi because they had not thought that this would have happened. And they pronounce a blessing on her. Verse 15, may he be a restorer of life and a sustainer of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons has given birth to him. And Naomi took the child, laid him in her lap, and became his nurse. The neighbor women gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi, so they named him Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. So here you have the child born to this foreign woman. She is the grandmother of King David. Actually, great-grandmother. What an amazing line here. Of course, we know Jesus is of the line of David, both on his father and his mother's sides there. So all these blessings pronounced because of Ruth. Do you know what the name Obed means? It's actually a verb. It's a verb that's translated as serving, which is a very appropriate name for this boy because Ruth made it her goal to serve Naomi. She sacrificed the life that she had in that other country, her homeland, to go with Naomi, to serve Naomi, to work in the fields for Naomi, to take the role of the widow in this case and marry a man who is, according to what we read, much older than she is. And, she's been a serving type of person. And so it's appropriate that her son would be named Serving. Yes?
Pretty sure they brought up the deal about Tamar because she is Boaz's great-great-great-great-grandma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's related as well, so.
Shortcut said Perez started the generations at Perez, which was Tamar's son.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're probably gloating about his family tree and stuff.
Yeah. And it's right because you should not blame a child for the child's origin in any way. As a matter of fact, in Jeremiah, God chastised the people for saying the fathers have eaten sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge. They had noticed a delay between the sin and the punishment. And a lot of times the fathers would sin and it would be the children who bore the brunt of the punishment or bad results of that sin. And God said, you're not going to say this anymore. You're not going to fix the sins of the father upon the youth. The soul that sins, it will die. And so God was against that. But in this particular case, there's a blessing passed on here. And definitely Perez and Obed are those people that are recipients of the great blessings because God had a system set up and he had its faults and had its failures, but they followed it. So we have the generations of Perez, as Jeff mentioned here, and going on down to Boaz, which is why they would mention him. And not gloss over that. Anyway, any other comments about Ruth? She's an amazing person, and one that, young ladies everywhere could learn so much from, and young boys too. The heart of a servant is something all of us need. Putting your own desires, your own wants, secondary to someone who is in need, like Naomi was. We're going to go next to another book about a woman, the book of Esther. Esther, you're going to find her right after Nehemiah and right before Job. And Job's right before Psalms. So if you can find Psalms, you can work your way back. Some years back, Hubert Plumley came and did a gospel meeting with us. And at one point, we were talking about having Hubert come and work with our Bible school program. And even as far back as that was, that's been way over 20 years ago. Hubert took one look at our classroom building and says, call me back when y'all have a replacement for that. But anyway, seeing Nehemiah here reminded me of something that Hubert, a little joke he used to tell. He said, do you know who the shortest man in the Bible was? Some people think it was Zacchaeus because he had to climb up in the tree to see Jesus. He said, but there was another person shorter than shorter than Zacchaeus. And that was Nehemiah. But there was another shorter than Nehemiah, and that was Bildad the Shuhite. But the shortest person in the Bible was the Philippian jailer, because he went to sleep on his watch. Anyway, that's a free joke, and it's worth every penny of it, right? Book of Esther. Did you ever wonder how the books we have got into the Bible? Why certain books were chosen? There were a lot of different writings. If you have a Catholic Bible, there's a portion of it called the Apocrypha, and it has a number of different books that are not in our Bible. And one of those reasons is that the Jewish leaders had rejected those as not being inspired works. The book of Esther was opposed by a number of people for different reasons. One of those reasons is that when you read through the book of Esther, one of the things you'll notice is something that's not there. You know what that is? God. There is no mention of God. Even when there is a fast declared, and the fasting is obviously for a time of prayer, God is not mentioned. And even when Esther's uncle, Mordecai, talks about fate, or what we would call destiny, there's another word for it, providence of God, that Mordecai makes a statement, perhaps it is for such a time as this that you were born. Still not mentioning God. And I'm not really sure why, but there's a celebration at the end of Esther that the Jews celebrated and became one of their biggest celebrations for the nation. And the book of Esther explains how that celebration came about. So we're going to go ahead and look at the life of Esther. The life of Esther really begins with a little prelude here between Vashti and the king Ahasuerus, who has another name in history. What's the other name? Xerxes. Jeff?
Another link, though, to Esther is that Mordecai is also mentioned in Ezekiel.
Yes.
So there was a linkage there in that flow, that time period.
Another supporting document that says, yes, this guy was actually there. And I have no doubt that everything in this story is accurate and happened. The names and everything those names are put in there very specifically. This book's been around for a long time. It's never been challenged as far as being inaccurate historically, and it has some very, very important lessons for all of us. And some of them don't even involve Esther. In the very first part of the book of Esther, we're told about a special banquet. This is a banquet that's going on for 180 days. Now, this is a party, a half year of partying. And this is something that everybody's involved with. In verse 8, talks about the drinking. The drinking is according to the law. There's no compulsion for that anyone should drink as they want to. And they're all having their celebrations. The king's got his celebration with all the guys. The queen has her celebration with all the gals. And then on the seventh day, verse 10, and the king's heart is merry with wine, he gives a command. Guys, gals, when you're merry with wine is the wrong time to start giving commands, ordering your spouse around. Just not a good idea, okay? He gives a command to his wife to bring her to his party. He wants to display her beauty. Verse 12, she doesn't come. I'm not going to go up there and have a bunch of drunk guys ogling me. I'm sure that's crossing her mind. She's got a little bit of pride here. But what the king's doing is actually degrading to women. But what she does in return is humiliating to the king. So what has happened is these two people are married to one another, and they are the textbook of do's and don'ts for married couples. Number one, don't live single, or live like you're single when you're married. And that's one of the things that they were both doing. Number two, don't stay apart for prolonged periods of time. That is an invitation to other problems. Number three, yes, drinking was involved. And that just does not seem to ever work out for anything, does it? Number four, they put each other in bad spots publicly. Number five, the king paints himself into a corner. And number six, when she refuses, he decides he's going to get even with her. Originally, it's not his idea. It's the princes who press him on this. You know, when they're all together, he's given the command, bring Queen Vashti, and here comes the servant. King Xerxes? Yeah. She won't come. What do you mean she won't come? She said no. She told me no? Yes. The princess, I could just hear the collective gasp. And then the princess said, each prince said, you've got to do something about your wife. Because if you don't, this is going to get out, and our wives are going to hear the same thing, and then we're not going to be able to boss them around like we have before. So they tell the king, you've got to really do something here. And so, verse 19, if it pleases the king, let a royal edict be issued by him. Let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media so that it cannot be repealed. They were so proud of their laws, once made, always made. The Vashti should come no more into the presence of King Ahasuerus. Let the king give her her royal position to another who is more worthy than she. And so he sends this all out. Verse 22, he sends letters to all the king's provinces, to each province according to its script, to every people according to their language, that every man should be the master in his own house. All right, that's what this is all about. Power struggle. Man's going to be the master. not a partner. From what part of the body of Adam was Eve taken to make Eve? From his side. And there's a significance to that. So this has all been done. It's an overreaction. Whenever you start off with a bad choice, pretty much everything that follows is going to be a bad choice. So this just keeps getting worse and worse. And now the party's over, and the king's minus a queen. So they're going to start a search for the queen, a new queen. And it's kind of going to be a beauty and talent pageant. They're going to get some of the best looking women in the kingdom. And that's when Mordecai hears about it. And he's got somebody in mind for this. Hadassah, named also Esther. You know, there's some cases where when Israel was in captivity, they were given different names. And sometimes those names stuck and sometimes they did not stick. Daniel was called Belteshazzar. But that, for some reason, just did not stick. Now, they did continue to call him that, but he was not known by that name to his fellow people. Then there was Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael. We know them as what? Yes. Those names stuck for some reason, but Hadassah is her Jewish name, and she's given the name Esther in this foreign land. So they have this contest going on. Mordecai is going to advise her, and she's going to listen to him. And there is also a king's eunuch who's in charge of the concubines. He's in charge of all these gals. And there's a certain number of things that they can do. And Esther will go to him and ask for his advice. There's a point during all of this that they come into the king's presence and they can ask for anything they want. He says, you want to impress the king? Ask for this. And she does as he advises. So she's got a little bit of a person that has noticed her, has recognized her worth, and he thinks this is really the right kind of person for the king. So he's going to advise her in the way that she ought to go, and she listens to him. And because she listens to him, she's got one up on all the rest of the competition. So Esther is going to prove herself here in a number of different ways as we go through this study. But we're going to stop here because we've got about 5 minutes left before, I think the first bell's supposed to ring any time now. So anybody, there we go. And there's a good reason we put that speaker out in the foyer. Anybody got any questions or comments about Ruth from our previous study or about Esther? You know, some things you want to bring out that you've read about maybe. I might cover them, I might not.
We probably never heard anything about Ruth if she was not in the lineage of Christ.
If she had stayed home, what happened to Orpah? We don't know. Would have been the same with Ruth, wouldn't it? Good point.
They're both mentioned in Matthew 1. Ruth and Boaz both.
Yes. In the lineage there, yeah. Ruth and Boaz both. People doing, Boaz making some sacrifices too. This child they're going to have, and apparently it does not appear that Boaz is married. It does not appear he ever had any other children other than just Obed, as far as we can read in Scripture. So Boaz sacrificed his line to Obed. So his ended.
Obed-Edom, where they put the Ark of the Covenant, was that associated with them?
I do not know. I need to research that to see where that came from, if there's a tie-in to that. It's a good question.
There was also a law about the redemption in the time of Jubilee to, if it would revert to some of the nearest family member also, that person could redeem that
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, the year of Jubilee came every 50 years, and someone mortgaged their property, they had the chance to buy it back. And there's a little bit of question about whether or not it would just be returned to them without them having to pay the price or not. Because we're told that the people are warned, don't let the near approach of Jubilee affect you helping your brothers, and loaning them something. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Every 50 years, everybody's debts are canceled.
In Hawaii, property, they can own property for 100 years.
In Hawaii. Hawaii's a little different. If you live on the island, the big island, and the volcano erupts and the lava goes onto your land, you lose your land. It goes to the state. That doesn't relate to Esther, but I just thought of that. Anyone else? All right, we're going to go ahead and call an end to the study tonight. We'll pick up with Esther in chapter 2 next week, Lord willing.